Grace carried the boss's 7-year-old son on her back to his office, and the reason shocked everyone at the company. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. The winter in Pennsylvania arrived early that year in 2024, bringing with it a persistent drizzle that seemed to mirror the melancholy hanging over the Cavalcanti mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Rittenhouse Square. It was one of those imposing buildings from the 1940s, with its 3 stories, immaculate French garden, and wrought iron gates that whispered stories of prosperous generations. But behind the majestic facade, invisible cracks threatened the entire family structure. Grace pushed the cleaning cart down the hallway of the 2nd floor, her footsteps silent on the Italian marble. At 42, she possessed a simple and natural beauty. Brown hair always tied in a low bun, almond-shaped eyes reflecting a wisdom acquired through years of silent observation, and calloused hands that told stories of hard work since her teenage years. Coming from the interior of Pennsylvania, specifically from the town of Three Rivers, she carried not only the musicality of her accent, but also solid values taught by her grandmother. "My dear, we may be poor in money, but we can never be poor in character." On that Thursday morning, June 15th, something felt different. During her 5 years working in that house, Grace had developed an almost supernatural intuition for sensing the nuances of the family environment. The silence that hung over the mansion was not the usual silence of elegance, it was the heavy silence of unresolved tension. "Good morning, Miss Grace." The childish voice of Michael Cavalcanti echoed down the hallway, interrupting her thoughts. The 7-year-old came running, still in his Spider-Man pajamas, his tousled brown hair and bright green eyes sparkling with the typical energy of childhood. Despite belonging to a privileged family, Michael had something fragile about his appearance. He was smaller than other children his age, with a pallor that betrayed too much time spent indoors. "Good morning, my angel," Grace replied, her face lighting up immediately. It was impossible not to smile in front of that child who, even surrounded by luxury, sought genuine affection in the simplest places. "Have you had breakfast yet?" "Not yet. Carmen didn't come today, and Mommy left very early for that ladies' meeting at the Charity Institute." Michael grimaced as he spoke, unconsciously mimicking the formal tone he heard at home. Grace was well aware of this routine. Isabella Cavalcanti, at 38, was a woman of refined beauty, blonde, tall, always impeccably dressed in designer clothes. Her universe revolved around social events, charity gatherings that functioned more as showcases of social status than true acts of solidarity. Her blue eyes, which once sparkled with dreams and hopes, now seemed constantly distant, as if she were always somewhere else, even when physically present. "And your dad?" Grace asked as she led Michael toward the kitchen. "Oh, he already left for the office. He said he has a very important meeting today with some Japanese investors who want to invest in the company." Michael spoke as if reciting a memorized lesson, something he heard repeatedly but didn't fully understand. Edward Cavalcanti was a 43-year-old man, tall and imposing, with black hair already showing the first grey strands at his temples. Heir to a business empire built by his grandfather in the 1960s, he carried the weight of family expectations on his broad shoulders. His company, Cavalcanti and Associates, specialized in the import and export of industrial equipment and was one of the most respected in the industry. At least that was what everyone believed. In the spacious modern kitchen with granite countertops and imported appliances, Grace prepared Michael's breakfast with the care of someone looking after a child. French toast with cinnamon, milk with chocolate syrup, and fruits cut into fun shapes. It was her silent way of compensating for the constant absence of the boy's parents. "Miss Grace," Michael said, stirring the chocolate milk with a spoon too small for his eager hands. "Why are my parents always busy? Last night I heard them talking in the office, and Mommy was crying." That question hit Grace like a punch in the stomach. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that his parents were lost in their own ambitions and insecurities? How could she say that love sometimes gets lost amid the noise of adult responsibilities? "Look, my love," she sat beside him, carefully choosing her words. "Sometimes adults get worried about things that seem very important, but they forget what is really important. That doesn't mean they don't love you. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them of what truly matters. And you never forget about me." Michael smiled, and in that smile, Grace saw all the purity of a child who still believes in unconditional love. Never, my angel, never at all. At that moment, the house phone rang insistently. Grace answered, immediately recognizing the voice of Michael's school secretary. "Miss Maria das Graças, this is Fernanda from St. Benedict School. We've been trying to reach the Cavalcanti family for 2 hours, but their phones are busy or out of service." "Is something wrong?" Grace felt her heart race. "Michael didn't come to school today, and we want to confirm if there's a health issue or if it's an excused absence. We always call when there are uncommunicated absences." Grace looked at Michael, who was finishing his breakfast calmly. "But he's here at home, Miss Fernanda. I don't understand." "What do you mean? We have a record that he should be in physical education class right now. Are you sure it's Michael Cavalcanti from the 2nd grade? Year B?" A strange sensation washed over Grace. She looked at the calendar on the fridge, and her blood ran cold. It was Thursday, a regular school day. There were no notes about absence or medical appointments. Michael should have been at school for 2 hours. "Michael," she approached him carefully, "honey, shouldn't you be at school right now?" The boy lowered his head, nervously fiddling with the spoon. I didn't want to go today." "Why, my love?" "Because today is the presentation of the family project, and all the kids are going to talk about their parents. João said his dad is going to teach him how to play soccer this weekend. Sophia said her mom is going to bake a birthday cake with her. And I don't know what to say about my parents." Michael's words echoed through the silent kitchen. Like glass shattering, Grace felt tears burning in her eyes, but held them back. At that moment, she understood that the storm approaching the Cavalcanti family was not just financial or marital. It was an emotional storm that was destroying the heart of an innocent child. "Fernanda, can I call you back in a few minutes? I'm going to sort this out and take Michael to school," she said on the phone, her firm voice masking her internal turmoil. After hanging up, she knelt in front of Michael, gently holding his small hands. "My angel, you have so many good things to say about your family. You have parents who work hard to give you a good life, a beautiful home, and an education at an excellent school." "But they're never here with me," Michael interrupted, his simple words laden with a sadness no child should bear. Grace took a deep breath. In that instant, she made a decision that would change everything. Not just about that day, but about the entire trajectory of a family that, without realizing it, was disintegrating while chasing dreams that had turned into silent nightmares. "Then we're going to change that," she said with a determination that surprised even herself. "We'll find a way to make your parents remember what really matters." After convincing Michael to get ready for school and explaining to the educational coordinator that there had been a family misunderstanding, Grace returned to her cleaning routine in the mansion with a heavy heart. However, her mind was far from the household chores. While vacuuming the office of Edward on the 1st floor of the house, she couldn't stop thinking about Michael's words, about hearing his parents talking and his mother crying. Edward's office was an environment that perfectly reflected the businessman's personality. Dark mahogany furniture, shelves filled with books on management and economics, framed diplomas on the walls, and an imposing executive desk strategically positioned facing the window overlooking the garden. It was there that Edward spent most of his nights, even when at home. As she moved the leather chair to vacuum underneath it, Grace noticed some papers scattered on the floor, apparently fallen from the paper tray. Her first reaction was to pick them up immediately. After all, privacy was something sacred in her professional code of ethics. But as she bent down to collect them, some bold words jumped out at her. Notice of protest. Overdue. Tax execution. Grace stopped, her heart racing. Her training in accounting, interrupted 15 years ago by circumstances she preferred not to recall, made her immediately understand the gravity of those documents. It wasn't just one or two overdue bills. There were dozens of notifications from different creditors, all dated within the last 3 months. "Grace!" Isabella's shrill voice echoed through the house, startling her and causing her to quickly gather the papers and put them back in the tray. "I'm in the office, Miss Isabella," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady while her heart raced. Isabella appeared in the office doorway wearing a navy blue Chanel dress, high heels, and an expression of irritation that had become habitual on her face. At 38, she maintained an impeccable beauty thanks to regular aesthetic treatments, but there was something artificial about her appearance, like a porcelain doll that had lost its original shine. "I need you to go through all my clothes in the main closet. We have a charity dinner at the Ritz-Carlton tonight, and I need to look flawless," she said, not even looking directly at Grace. "And make sure my gold Valentino dress is ready. That's what I'm going to wear." "Of course, Ms. Isabella, but may I ask, Michael mentioned that he heard you crying last night. Is everything okay?" The question made Isabella stop abruptly, her blue eyes hardening. "Michael should be sleeping, not listening to adult conversations, and you, Grace, should focus on your duties, not on family matters that don't concern you." "I'm sorry, Ms. Isabella. It's just that I worry about the boy, and your concern is commendable but unnecessary. Michael has parents to take care of him." The coldness in Isabella's voice contrasted with the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands, something that did not escape Grace's keen observation. When Isabella left the office, her heels echoing down the marble hallway, Grace was left alone with a whirlwind of thoughts. She recognized the signs. She had lived through this situation before in her own family, years ago. The excessive irritability, the trembling hands, the slightly glazed eyes. Isabella was on some kind of medication, probably sedatives or anxiolytics, and in concerning doses. The sound of the garage door opening announced Edward's unexpected arrival. It was only 2 in the afternoon. Far too early for him to return from the office. Grace heard heavy footsteps climbing the main staircase, followed by the sound of the couple's bedroom door slamming shut. Curious and worried, she quietly ascended to the 2nd floor. She stopped in front of the bedroom door, where she could hear a heated conversation. "Isabella, we can't postpone this conversation any longer." Edward's voice was heavy with tension. "The Japanese cancelled the meeting. They found out about the issues with the IRS." "What do you mean they found out? Didn't you say everything was resolved?" Isabella's voice was sharp, almost hysterical. "I thought it was. But Rodrigo, my partner for 15 years, he had been embezzling money longer than we imagined. The accounts we thought were settled were paid with non-existent funds." There was a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of stifled sobs. "Edward, I spent $40,000 just this month. The credit card, the clothes for the events, the country club fees, Dr. Patricia's cosmetic treatments." Isabella's voice was breaking. "How am I going to explain to my friends that I can no longer maintain our lifestyle?" "Our friends?" Edward laughed bitterly. "Isabella, we could lose the house. The company has frozen accounts, the employees didn't get paid last month, and you're worried about what your country club friends think?" Grace leaned against the wall, feeling her legs weaken. The situation was even worse than the documents suggested. This family was not just facing financial difficulties, they were on the brink of total collapse. And what about Michael? What are we going to do about his school? It's $8,000 a month. Isabella was clearly in panic. Michael, Edward sighed deeply. Maybe it's best if he stays with my parents in Riverside for a while, until we can get our lives back on track. Those words hit Grace like a lightning bolt. Send Michael away. Separate a 7-year-old from everything he knew. She couldn't accept that these parents, lost in their own crises, would consider distancing their child at a time when he needed emotional stability the most. But Edward, he's just a child. We can't just send him away because our lives have turned into chaos. Finally, Isabella was showing some genuine concern for their son. So tell me, Isabella, what's your solution? How are we going to explain to a 7-year-old that we might have to leave this house? That I might end up in jail for being jointly liable for Rodrigo's crimes? That you will have to stop taking the medication you've been secretly using because we won't have health insurance anymore? The silence that followed was deafening. Grace realized there were tears in her own eyes. This family was falling apart, and Michael, innocent and already craving attention, would be the biggest victim of this tragedy. When footsteps approached the door, Grace quickly stepped away and went down the stairs, pretending to be busy with cleaning. But her mind was racing. She had accounting knowledge, experience with struggling businesses. More importantly, she loved Michael as if he were her own son. That afternoon, while ironing clothes in the service room, Grace made a decision that would change not only her life, but the fate of the entire Cavalcanti family. She couldn't stand by and watch this family destroy itself, especially knowing that an innocent child was at the center of this storm. At 5 in the afternoon, when Michael's school day ended, she was waiting at the gate of St. Benedict School. The boy ran into her arms, as he always did, but this time his embrace was filled with a different intensity. "Miss Grace, today at the presentation, I talked about you," Michael said, his green eyes shining. "I said you are the person who cares about me the most in my family." Those simple words from a 7-year-old sealed their fate. Grace looked at Michael and made a silent promise. No matter the cost, she would not allow this family to fall apart. And if that meant breaking a few rules, confronting some patterns, and revealing some secrets, then so be it. The storm was just beginning, but Grace was ready to face it. The morning of July 22nd arrived with the characteristic chill of a Pennsylvania winter, accompanied by a persistent drizzle that turned the city into a dark mirror of itself. Grace woke up at 5 in the morning in her small apartment in the Gardens, as she had done every day for the past 5 years. Her home was simple yet cozy. A 40-square-meter studio on the 3rd floor of an old building, decorated with photographs of her family in 3 Rivers and a few items she had brought from Pennsylvania. While preparing her morning coffee, French bread with butter and freshly brewed coffee, she checked her phone messages. 3 missed calls from Carmen, the housekeeper who stayed at the Cavalcanti residence during the week. The last message, sent at 4 in the morning, made her heart race. "Grace, my mother had a heart attack in San Francisco. I had to travel urgently. I won't be able to work today, maybe not even tomorrow. The employers left last night for Miami, that business conference. Michael is alone. Can you check on him? I'm desperate." Grace felt the blood run cold in her veins. Michael, only 7 years old, alone in that huge mansion all night. How could Edward and Isabella travel, knowing the housekeeper might not be able to come to work? The irresponsibility of those parents left her outraged. She quickly dressed in her usual work attire, dark jeans, a long-sleeve white blouse and comfortable sneakers, and caught the first bus heading to the Gardens. During the 40-minute ride, her mind was racing with terrible scenarios. What if Michael had woken up scared during the night? What if he had tried to prepare something to eat and got hurt? What if someone with bad intentions knew the house was practically empty? She arrived at the mansion at 6:40 in the morning, using her employee key to open the back gate. The house. Grace was enveloped in a grave silence that left her even more worried. She quickly ascended the main staircase towards Michael's room on the second floor. The door was ajar. She peeked inside and saw Michael sleeping soundly in his twin bed, clutching a well-worn teddy bear, a gift she had given him on his last birthday. The boy looked too small in that huge room, with its walls adorned with superhero posters and a shelf filled with expensive toys that were rarely used. Relieved, Grace descended to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. It was then that she noticed something strange. On the marble countertop, there was a plate with remnants of instant noodles and a half-full glass of milk. Michael had tried to feed himself during the night. The image of that 7-year-old preparing his own food in the middle of the night, because there was no responsible adult to take care of him, filled her eyes with tears of anger and sadness. At 7:30, she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Michael appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, his hair messy and a confused expression on his face. "Miss Grace, how did you get here?" His voice was still hoarse from sleep. "Good morning, my love. Carmen called me because she had to travel on an emergency, and I came to take care of you." She knelt down to be at eye level with the boy. "Did you spend the whole night alone?" Michael nodded, trying to appear brave. "I wasn't scared. I'm a big boy. It's just that I woke up hungry in the middle of the night and tried to make food, but I couldn't light the stove properly." "Oh my God, Michael! What if you had hurt yourself?" The concern in her voice was evident. "It's okay, Miss Grace. I ate cold noodles anyway. It wasn't that bad." The boy forced a smile, trying to reassure her. At that moment, Grace felt an explosive mix of maternal love and indignation. How could those parents be so irresponsible? How could they leave a 7-year-old completely alone for an entire night? She prepared a hearty breakfast for Michael, pancakes with honey, chocolate milk and chopped fruit, while he took a shower and got ready for school. But when he came down to the kitchen already dressed, Michael was different. His cheeks were flushed, and he was coughing persistently. "My angel, are you feeling okay?" Grace placed her hand on his forehead and felt that he was warm. "You have a fever." "I'm a little tired, but I can go to school," Michael tried to argue, but another coughing fit interrupted him. Grace grabbed the thermometer from the medicine cabinet. 39 degrees, high fever, and the boy's breathing was clearly labored, as if he were struggling to get enough air. "Michael, you're staying home today. I'm going to call the school and let them know you're sick." "But Miss Grace, what if my parents call and find out I didn't go to school? They'll be mad." The innocence of that concern broke Grace's heart. A 7-year-old, sick and feverish, was more worried about disappointing his absent parents than about his own well-being. "My love, your parents will understand. You're sick and need care." She tried to call Edward, but the phone indicated that it was out of service. She tried Isabella, same result. Throughout the morning, Michael's condition progressively worsened. The fever rose to 39.5 degrees, and his breathing became even more difficult. He complained of chest pains and was clearly weakened. Grace tried to contact the family pediatrician, but the receptionist informed her that he could only see patients in the late afternoon. "Miss Grace," Michael called her weakly, lying on the living room sofa, "I feel really bad. It feels like there's a weight on my chest." Those words set off alarm bells in Grace's mind. Difficulty breathing in a child was not something to wait on. She needed to take him to the emergency room immediately. But then came the first complication. She didn't have a car. Edward and Isabella had taken both family cars to the airport. She tried to call a taxi, but the dispatcher's phone indicated a wait time of over an hour due to an accident on I-95 that was congesting the entire area. She opened the ride-sharing app on her phone. No drivers available in the area. She tried another app. Same result. The rideshare drivers' strike, which had started on Monday, was still affecting the entire city. With Michael increasingly breathless on the sofa, Grace made the hardest decision of her life. She only knew one address where she could find help for Michael, Edward's office in downtown New York City. It was there that she would find someone who could authorize private medical care, or at least help her locate the parents. "Michael, my love, we're leaving now. I'm going to take you to your father's office to get help." "But it's too far, Miss Grace. How are we going to get there?" Grace looked out the window at the persistent drizzle outside, then looked at Michael, clearly weakened, but completely trusting her. At that moment, she knew what she had to do. "I'm going to carry you, my angel. You'll be safe on Miss Grace's back." Michael looked at her with a mix of surprise and admiration. "But it's so far. Can you do it?" "For you, my love, I can do anything." And so, at 11 o'clock on a cold Thursday morning in July, Grace placed Michael on her back, covered him with her own jacket to protect him from the drizzle, and began the most important walk of her life towards downtown New York City. It was more than 10 kilometers away, but a mother's love can move mountains, or in this case, carry a child in need. It was a case of carrying a sick child across an entire city. The typical fine drizzle of New York City's winter began to intensify as Grace and Michael left the mansion in the gardens. The boy, weighing 30 pounds, was clinging to her back, wrapped in the navy blue jacket she wore for work. His thin little arms wrapped around her neck, and she could feel his labored breathing against her nape. "Miss Grace, are you sure you can do this?" Michael asked. His voice weak but concerned. Even while sick, that 7-year-old child worried more about her than himself. "I'm sure, my angel. We'll get there. You'll see." Grace adjusted the weight of the boy, redistributing it so she could walk longer. Her years of carrying buckets of water in her childhood in 3 Rivers had strengthened her muscles, but she knew the journey would be challenging. They started down Augusta Street toward downtown. The first few blocks were relatively easy, but as they progressed, Michael's weight began to take its toll on Grace's shoulders. She stopped every 500 meters to reposition the boy and check how he was feeling. "Michael, how's your breathing?" she would always ask, trying to hide her own growing concern. It's a little hard, Miss Grace. But I'm okay here with you," he replied, tightening his grip around her neck. By the time they reached Paulista Avenue, they had walked about 3 kilometers. Grace's legs began to tremble slightly, and she needed to stop at a bus stop to rest for a few minutes. She sat Michael next to her on a bench, wet from the drizzle. "My love, let me see how you are." She touched his forehead again, still feverish, but at least his temperature hadn't risen. "Does anything hurt?" "A little in my chest, Miss Grace. But you know what?" Michael looked at her with those bright green eyes, even while sick. "I've never walked this much around the city. It's beautiful to see the streets from up here, on your back." That innocent observation touched Grace's heart deeply. A 7-year-old child, raised in a luxury environment where he was only transported in armored cars, was discovering the city for the first time in such a simple and pure way. "It really is, isn't it? The city is big and full of different people," she replied, helping him climb onto her back again. They continued their journey down Consolation. With every step, Grace felt not only the physical weight of Michael, but also the emotional weight of the responsibility she had taken on. That child trusted her completely, and she couldn't let him down. By the time they reached Republic, Michael began to talk more, perhaps to distract both of them from the difficulty of the walk. "Miss Grace, can I tell you a secret?" His voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Of course, my angel, you can tell me anything. Sometimes, when I'm at school and the other kids talk about the things they do with their parents, I pretend that you are my mom." Michael's words hit Grace like a bolt of lightning. She had to stop in the middle of the sidewalk, tears mixing with the drizzle on her face. How could a 7-year-old child carry such emotional loneliness? "Michael," she began, but he kept talking. "I know you're not my real mom, but you take care of me like you are. When I'm sad, you always know. When I'm hungry, you make delicious food. When I have nightmares, you always come to my room to check if I'm okay." Grace turned to look Michael in the eyes. "My love, I take care of you because I love you very much, and you will always have a special place in my heart no matter what. Even if my parents send you away, even if we have to move far away." The question revealed that Michael had overheard more of his parents' conversations than they realized. "Even then, my angel, the love we feel for people doesn't have an address. It lives here," she pointed to her own chest, "and no one can take it away." They resumed walking, but now there was an even deeper connection between them. Michael began to softly sing a song that Grace had taught him, a children's song she learned from her grandmother in Pennsylvania. The child's voice, even hoarse from illness, brought unexpected comfort to that moment of adversity. "Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down." They passed by Republic Square, where Michael was fascinated watching the pigeons flying even in the drizzle. "Miss Grace, do the little birds feel cold like us?" "Yes, my love. That's why they huddle together to keep warm, just like we're doing now." On Rio Branco Avenue, they had already covered more than 6 kilometers. Grace felt her legs heavy and her shoulders aching, but her determination outweighed her fatigue. Michael had grown quieter in the last 15 minutes, worrying her. "Michael, are you awake?" "I am, Miss Grace. I'm just thinking." "Thinking about what?" "I'm thinking that when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to take care of people who need it even when it's hard." Those simple words from a 7-year-old gave Grace renewed strength to continue. If Michael could find inspiration amidst his own pain and discomfort, she could certainly find the strength to carry him to their destination. When they finally arrived at November 15th Street, in the historic center of New York City, it was almost 2 in the afternoon. They had walked for over 3 hours, with breaks to rest. The commercial building where Cavalcanti and Associates' office was located loomed before them like a monument of glass and concrete. Grace stopped on the sidewalk in front of the building, panting and with the clothes soaked by the persistent drizzle. Michael got down from her back and stood by her side, holding her hand tightly. "We've arrived, my love," she said, trying to smile despite her extreme fatigue. Michael looked up, observing the 30 floors of the building. "It's so tall. Does Daddy work up there?" "On the 13th floor," Grace confirmed, still trying to catch her breath. It was then that Michael did something completely unexpected. He hugged her around the waist and said, "Miss Grace, thank you for carrying me all the way here. I know it was very heavy and very far. No one has ever done something like this for me." At that moment, in front of that office building, under a cold July drizzle, Grace understood that this walk had been much more than a means of transportation. It had been a journey of love, courage, and mutual discoveries. She had physically carried Michael, but he had carried her emotionally, reminding her of the transformative power of unconditional love. Now it was time to face what awaited them inside. And she had a feeling that the discoveries they would make in Edward's office would change everything forever. The lobby of the office building on November 15th Street was imposing, with Carrara marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and decor that exuded prosperity. Grace and Michael entered, soaked by the drizzle, catching the attention of the uniformed doorman, who watched them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Excuse me," Grace approached the reception desk, still breathless from the long walk. "I need to go up to the office of Cavalcanti and Associates on the 13th floor. This is Mr. Edward Cavalcanti's son." The doorman, a middle-aged man with a graying mustache, looked from Michael to Grace with skepticism. Their appearance, simple, wet clothes, hair disheveled by the drizzle, drastically contrasted with the luxurious environment of the building. "Do you have authorization to go up with the child? I need an ID and confirmation from the office," he said in a formal and somewhat arrogant tone. "Sir, this child is sick and needs urgent care. I have been with the family for 5 years," Grace tried to explain, but her voice betrayed her exhaustion and worry. "I'm sorry, but those are the building rules. I can't let anyone go up without prior authorization." Michael, sensing the tension, timidly approached the desk. "Sir, my name is Michael Cavalcanti. My daddy works here on the 13th floor. Can we go up, please? I'm not feeling very well." The doorman looked at the boy, clearly feverish, with flushed cheeks and labored breathing, and his expression began to soften. It was impossible not to notice that he was indeed a sick child. "I will call Cavalcanti and Associates to confirm," he said, picking up the phone. After a few moments of conversation, the doorman frowned. "How strange! No one is answering up there. Let me try another extension." Grace and Michael waited anxiously as the man made a few more attempts. Finally, someone answered. "Hello? This is the building reception. There's a lady with a child here wanting to go up to Cavalcanti and Associates." "What? Oh, I see. Yes, I will send them up." The doorman hung up with a confused expression. "The secretary said you can go up, but warned me that there are some complicated situations happening in the office today." In the elevator, Michael leaned against Grace, clearly exhausted from the journey. "Miss Grace, why did the man say there are complicated situations?" "I don't know, my love. But we will find out. The important thing is that we've arrived and we will get help for you." The elevator doors opened on the 13th floor, revealing an elegant corridor with grey carpeting and walls covered in fine wood. But there was something strange about the atmosphere, a heavy silence that did not match the usual bustle of a functioning office. The reception of Cavalcanti and Associates was spacious and modern, with Italian designer furniture and a stunning view of downtown New York City. But only one person was present, a woman in her 50s, with blonde hair tied in a bun, wearing a navy blue suit. She stood up when she saw them enter. "You must be Grace and Michael. I'm Fernanda Smith, the executive secretary of Mr. Edward for 10 years, she said with a forced smile that could not hide the worry in her eyes. "Miss Fernanda, Michael is sick, and I urgently need to contact his parents. They are in Miami, but the phones aren't working," Grace explained quickly. Fernanda looked around nervously before responding. "Grace, I need to talk to you. Please have a seat." They settled onto the leather sofa in the reception area. Michael snuggled next to Grace, who wrapped her arm protectively around him. "Where is everyone? The office is very empty," Grace observed. "That's precisely the issue," Fernanda sighed deeply. "Grace, I don't know how to tell you this, but Mr. Edward is not in Miami." "What do you mean? He and Mrs. Isabella traveled last night for that conference." "No," Fernanda gently interrupted. "Mr. Edward has been hospitalized at St. Michael's Clinic for 3 days. He had a severe panic attack during a meeting with lawyers and needed to be admitted." Grace felt her world spin. "Hospitalized? But how? Why? Didn't anyone tell me?" "Mrs. Isabella requested absolute confidentiality. She is desperately maintaining appearances. To the outside world, they are in Miami on a business trip. In reality, Mr. Edward is undergoing treatment for a gambling addiction we discovered a week ago." Michael, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, lifted his head. "Miss Fernanda, is my daddy sick just like me?" Fernanda looked at the child with tenderness. "Your daddy is in a hospital where very good doctors are taking care of him, Michael. He will be okay, but he needs some time to recover." "And the company?" Grace asked, recalling the documents she had seen in Edward's office. Fernanda lowered her voice. "The situation is critical, Grace. Mr. Edward's partner, Robert, fled abroad with almost $2 million. The company's accounts are frozen. We have debts with suppliers and employees haven't been paid for 2 months. 2 months? Grace was shocked. But I saw Edward leaving for work every day. He did come here, yes, but he spent most of his time trying to resolve the situation or playing online. The addiction started as a way to escape stress, but turned into another problem. He lost over $500,000 of his personal funds on poker and sports betting sites. Michael tugged at Grace's sleeve. "Miss Grace, does this mean we have to leave our home?" The innocent question from the child made Fernanda and Grace exchange a worried glance. "Michael, your mommy and daddy are going through a tough time, but you are a strong family," Grace replied, carefully choosing her words. "Fernanda," Grace continued, "I need to take Michael to the doctor urgently. He has a high fever and difficulty breathing. How do I authorize medical care?" The family health plan was cancelled. Last week, due to non-payment, Fernanda revealed another bombshell. "But I have the authorization for medical emergencies involving Michael. I can authorize private care." It was then that something unexpected happened. Michael got up from the sofa and walked to the window that overlooked New York City. With his child's voice, but with a seriousness that impressed both women, he said, "Miss Fernanda, Miss Grace, I can help save my daddy's company." The two women looked at each other, surprised. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Grace asked. Michael turned to them, his green eyes shining despite the fever. "I know where Uncle Robert keeps some important papers. I saw him hiding them in a secret folder in the Home Office. He didn't know I was watching." Fernanda quickly stood up. "Michael, what kind of papers?" "Some papers with numbers and bank names. He talked on the phone about an account in another country. I memorized it because I thought it was strange. He was messing with Daddy's things when he wasn't home." At that moment, the 3 people on the 23rd floor of the office building realized that Michael, a 7-year-old child who had been carried for over 10 kilometers, might hold the key to saving not just the family business, but their entire future. The journey was far from over, but now they knew exactly what the next step was. The silence that followed Michael's words was interrupted only by the sound of rain hitting the windows of the 23rd floor. Fernanda approached the child, kneeling to be at his eye level. "Michael, this is very important. Can you remember exactly where you saw Uncle Robert hide those papers?" Her voice was gentle, but there was an urgency barely concealed. Michael scratched his head, deep in thought. "It was in Daddy's office on that big dark wood shelf. He opened a secret drawer behind the books. I was playing hide-and-seek under the table when he arrived." "And did you hear him talking about banks in other countries?" Grace asked, trying to stay calm despite her growing anxiety. "Yes, he talked to someone on the phone about transferring the money to Panama, and that no one would find out if the documents disappeared. I didn't understand it well, but I thought it was strange because Daddy always said that keeping money in other countries is something dishonest people do." Fernanda and Grace exchanged a meaningful glance. That information could be crucial in tracking the embezzled money and potentially recovering the company's resources. "Fernanda," Grace said, "we need to act fast. But first, Michael needs urgent medical attention. Look how pale and breathless he is." As if on cue, Michael started coughing violently, clutching his small chest. "Miss Grace, it hurts a lot inside," he whispered. Fernanda immediately grabbed her phone. "I'll call Dr. Henry Martin. He's a pediatrician and has an office nearby. It's private, but he's known to the family for years." As Fernanda made the call, Grace sat Michael back down on the sofa and checked his temperature with her palm. Still feverish, possibly higher than before. "Dr. Henry, this is Fernanda Smith from Cavalcanti and Associates. I have an emergency. Mr. Edward's son has a high fever and difficulty breathing. Yes, can it be now? We're on our way down." She hung up and turned to Grace. He will see Michael right away. The office is 2 blocks from here. But Grace, her voice turned serious, after Michael is treated, we need to urgently go back to that house to look for those documents. If they exist, they could be our only chance to save the company and prove Robert's fraud. Dr. Henry Martin's office was on the 10th floor of a medical building on Liberty Street. It was a welcoming environment, with walls decorated with children's drawings and a large aquarium with colorful fish that immediately caught Michael's attention. Dr. Henry was a man in his 60s, with grey hair and gold glasses. Known for his patience with children, he greeted Michael with a warm smile. "So you're the famous Michael. I treated you when you were a little baby, but you must be too grown up to remember me." Michael smiled shyly. "Doctor, I feel bad. It feels like there's a stone in my chest." The examination was thorough. Dr. Henry checked the temperature, 102 points centigrade, listened to the lungs, examined the throat, and measured the oxygen saturation. His expression gradually became more concerned. "Michael has the beginning of pneumonia," he explained to Grace and Fernanda, away from the child's ear. "Nothing serious yet, but he needs antibiotics immediately and complete rest. If you had waited a few more hours to bring him—" "But will he be okay?" Grace asked, her voice heavy with maternal concern. "Yes, with the proper treatment. But he needs constant care for the next 48 hours. Can someone from the family be responsible?" Fernanda quickly explained the situation. Absent parents, a traveling maid, only Grace available to care for the child. "I understand. In that case, ma'am," he looked at Grace, "you will be responsible for the treatment. I will give an injectable antibiotic now and prescribe oral medication for the next 7 days. It is essential that he takes all the medicine at the correct times." As Dr. Henry administered the injection to Michael, who was brave but squeezed Grace's hand tightly, Fernanda received a call that would change everything. "Hello? Fernanda speaking. What? Are you sure? When did this happen? I understand. Thank you for letting me know." She hung up with a look of total shock. "Grace, I've just received information that changes everything. Robert was arrested at the Lisbon airport trying to board a flight to Panama with fake documents. The Brazilian federal police had an international warrant out for him." "Is that good or bad?" Grace asked. "It's complicated. Good because he won't be able to escape for good. Bad because his lawyers are already working to say he's just a scapegoat and that the real culprit behind the irregularities is Edward." Michael, who had overheard part of the conversation while receiving his medication, tugged at Grace's shirt. "Miss Grace, does that mean they're going to blame my daddy for things he didn't do?" The innocent question struck all 3 women like lightning. A 7-year-old child had understood exactly the gravity of the situation. "That's why we need to find those documents you saw, my love. They can prove that your daddy is innocent," Grace gently explained. Dr. Henry finished the consultation and handed over the prescriptions. "Michael will feel better in a few hours, but he needs to rest. No physical activities for the next 3 days." "Doctor," Michael said, "if I help my family find some important papers, does that count as physical activity?" The doctor smiled at the peculiar question. "It depends on where those papers are, champ." "In the secret shelf of my daddy's office," Michael replied seriously. "Then I think we'll make an exception, as long as you rest plenty afterward." Back at the office building, while waiting for the taxi that Fernanda had called to take them back to the gardens, Michael made an observation that surprised both women. "Miss Fernanda, Miss Grace, do you know why I paid attention when Uncle Robert was going through Daddy's things?" "Why, my love?" Grace asked. "Because once I heard Daddy talking to Mommy about how important it is to trust the right people. He said that when someone goes through our things secretly, it's because they're doing something wrong. So when I saw Uncle Robert doing that, I knew he was doing something wrong with my daddy." At that moment, both Grace and Fernanda understood that Michael, despite being only 7 years old, had extraordinary intuition and emotional intelligence. He hadn't just witnessed something important, he had grasped the significance of what he saw. The taxi arrived, and during the ride back to the mansion in the gardens, Michael slept in Grace's lap, still weak but already feeling a bit better thanks to the medication. Fernanda took the opportunity to make several calls, coordinating with lawyers and accountants to be ready to analyze any documentation that might be found. When they arrived at the mansion, it was already 4:30 in the afternoon. The silent house welcomed them with its cold elegance. But now everyone knew that within those luxurious walls could be hidden the key to either save or definitively destroy the Cavalcanti family. Michael, still sleepy but determined, looked at the stairs leading to his father's office on the second floor. "Ready to discover the truth?" he asked, with a maturity that belied his 7 years. Grace and Fernanda exchanged glances. The answer lay in the courage of a child who, even when sick, was willing to fight for the family he loved. Edward's office on the second floor of the mansion seemed different now that Grace knew the truth. That environment, which had always seemed to her a symbol of success and prosperity, now revealed subtle signs of the crisis the family was facing. Papers scattered across the desk, drawers half open, and an air of neglect that she hadn't noticed before. Michael, still pale but determined, walked straight to the mahogany bookshelf that occupied the entire side wall of the office. It was an imposing piece, over 3 meters tall, filled with books on management, economics, and some volumes on the history of the Cavalcanti family. "This is where Uncle Robert was going through," Michael pointed to, the third shelf, at eye level. "He moved these books here," he demonstrated, carefully shifting some volumes on business law, "and pressed something behind." Fernanda approached, examining the area indicated by the boy. "Grace, you can reach better. Let's see if there's a hidden mechanism." Grace ran her hands over the wood behind the books, feeling every inch of the surface. Initially nothing, but when she pressed a small, almost imperceptible bump in the right corner, she heard a soft click. A section of the bookshelf slid to the side, revealing a secret compartment about 30 centimeters wide. "My God!" Fernanda exclaimed. "Michael, how did you see this from where you were hiding?" "I was under the desk playing fort when Uncle Robert arrived. I stayed quiet so he wouldn't see me, but I could see everything from down there," Michael explained, pointing to the space under his father's desk. Inside the secret compartment was a brown leather folder, apparently expensive, with the Robert's initials RM were embossed in gold. Fernanda carefully removed it and placed it on Edward's desk. "Let's see what we have here," she murmured, opening the folder. The contents were explosive. Bank statements from accounts in Panama under the names of shell companies Robert had created, fake service contracts he used to justify transfers of money from Cavalcanti and Associates to his personal accounts, and the most shocking, a series of printed emails where he detailed to an accomplice how he was slowly bleeding Edward's company dry so he wouldn't notice. "This is the definitive proof," Fernanda said, flipping through the documents with trembling hands. "Robert not only embezzled money, he meticulously planned everything over 2 years ago." Miss Grace picked up one of the emails and read aloud, "Edward is so addicted to online poker that he doesn't even realize I'm transferring 50,000 a month to the ghost accounts. By the time he finds out, it will be too late, and I will already be abroad." "Miss Fernanda," Michael asked, sitting in his father's armchair, "does this mean my daddy didn't do anything wrong?" "It means your daddy was a victim of someone he trusted very much, Michael. Yes, he made mistakes with gambling, but all the crimes were committed by Uncle Robert." As Fernanda took pictures of all the documents with her phone to send immediately to the lawyers, Miss Grace found something that shocked her even more. A handwritten letter from Robert, apparently prepared to be sent in case he was discovered. "You all need to hear this," she said, and began to read. "Edward, if you are reading this letter, it means you discovered my strategy. I want you to know that none of this was personal. It was just business. You have always been too naive for the business world your father created. Consider this a lesson in trusting the right people." The cold cynicism of those words left everyone in silence. Michael, even as a child, seemed to understand the cruelty of what had happened to his father. "Uncle Robert was very mean," he said simply, with the moral clarity that only children possess. Fernanda's phone rang. It was the family lawyer, Dr. Robert Anderson. "Dr. Robert, we have important news. Yes, we found documentary evidence. No, not just assumptions. Documents that prove the entire fraud. Can they come here now? We're at the family home." She hung up and turned to Miss Grace and Michael. "Dr. Robert is coming here with the legal team. They want to examine everything in person and already talk to the district attorney today." "And what about Edward? Does he know the news?" Miss Grace asked. "I will call the hospital now. This discovery completely changes his treatment. Knowing he is innocent of the most serious charges will greatly aid in his recovery." While Fernanda contacted the hospital where Edward was admitted, Michael approached Miss Grace, tugging at her shirt. "Miss Grace, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love. Anything." "If my daddy didn't do anything really wrong, why is he in the hospital?" The question hit the heart of the matter. How to explain to a 7-year-old about addictions, stress, and the complexities of the human mind when facing betrayals and excessive pressures. "Michael, your daddy is sick, but it's not a physical illness like your pneumonia. It's an illness of the soul, of the mind. When people get very sad, very scared, or very worried for too long, sometimes they do things they normally wouldn't do, like gamble money trying to forget their problems." "And will he get better?" "Yes, my love. Just like you will get better from your pneumonia by taking your medicine properly, your daddy will get better by receiving treatment from special doctors who care for people's minds." Michael seemed satisfied with the explanation. "And Mommy, is she sick too?" That question caught Miss Grace by surprise. How had Michael noticed that Isabella also had problems? "Why do you think your mommy is sick?" "Because she always seems very sad, even when she's smiling, and sometimes she talks to me, but it seems like she's talking to someone who's not there." The child's observation was surprisingly accurate. Michael had noticed the signs of his mother's substance dependency without technically understanding what he was seeing. "Your mommy is also going through a tough time, my love. But with the discovery of these papers, many family problems will start to resolve." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Through the intercom, Fernanda confirmed that the legal team was arriving. Within minutes, Edward's quiet office was filled with lawyers, accountants, and even a representative from the FBI who had been contacted to analyze the evidence found. Dr. Robert Anderson, a man in his mid-50s with graying hair and an elegant posture, approached Michael after examining the documents. "Michael, do you have any idea how much you helped your family today?" "Did I help a lot?" the boy asked, his green eyes shining with hope. "You helped save your father's company, clear his name, and probably recover a lot of the money that was stolen. You are a hero." Michael smiled, but then became serious. "Doctor, does this mean we won't have to move far away? That Miss Grace won't have to leave?" The question struck everyone present. A 7-year-old child, sick and tired, was worried not about recognition or rewards, but about preserving the family structure he knew, including the woman who had become his second mother. Dr. Robert looked at Miss Grace. Then, back at Michael. "Not only will you not be separated, but I suspect that starting today, many good things will begin to happen for the entire Cavalcanti family." As the lawyers organized all the documentation for legal proceedings, Miss Grace looked out the office window. The drizzle had stopped, and the first rays of afternoon sun began to peek through the clouds. Symbolically, it seemed that the storm that had hit the Cavalcanti family was finally starting to pass. But she knew there was still much work ahead. Edward needed to recover, Isabella needed to face her own demons, and Michael needed the emotional stability he had lost. Love and determination would be tested even further in the days to come. A week after the discovery of the documents, St. Michael's Clinic felt like a different place for Edward Cavalcanti. The psychiatrist, Dr. Mark Roberts, had explained that knowing his own innocence regarding the frauds had been crucial for his psychological recovery. The 43-year-old businessman, who had arrived there in a state of panic and total despair, now showed clear signs of improvement. "Edward, how are you feeling knowing you can go home tomorrow?" Dr. Mark asked during the Thursday morning session. "Relieved, doctor, but also scared," Edward admitted, sitting in the therapy chair. He had lost a few pounds during his stay, but his eyes had regained their spark. "I'm afraid to face Michael. He must be confused, hurt. God knows what he thought when he found out his father was hospitalized." "Edward, children are more resilient than we imagine, and from what you told me about Miss Grace, Michael had solid emotional support during your absence." "Grace," Edward sighed. "Doctor, I made the biggest mistake of my life not valuing that woman. She is not just an employee, she is the person who loves my son the most in this world, after me and Isabella." Dr. Mark took some notes. "And how do you plan to handle that relationship when you go home?" "Honestly, I don't know. I know I need to talk to her, apologize, officially recognize everything she has done, but most importantly, I need to learn from her how to be a real father." On the other side of the city, at the mansion in the gardens, the routine had completely changed. Grace was no longer just the housekeeper. She had officially become the caregiver responsible for Michael during his parents' absence, a position she had been effectively holding for years, but was now recognized and respected. Michael, already recovered from pneumonia thanks to her attentive care, was in the kitchen helping to prepare lunch. It was a scene that repeated daily, the 7-year-old boy sitting on a high stool next to the counter, peeling potatoes under Grace's loving supervision. "Miss Grace," Michael said, focused on his task, "when Dad comes home, do you think he will like having lunch with us?" The question touched Grace's heart. For years, Edward rarely had lunch at home, always busy with work meetings that they now knew were largely escapes from a reality he couldn't face. "I'm sure he will, my love. Your dad is learning important things at the hospital. One of them is that family is more important than work." "And Mom, is she going to have lunch with us too?" Isabella was a more delicate issue. After discovering Robert's frauds, she had voluntarily admitted herself to a rehabilitation clinic to treat her dependence on anti-anxiety medication. Unlike her husband, who was almost ready to return, she was still facing a longer recovery process. "Your mom will still be at the place where she is getting treatment for a little while, Michael, but she is getting better every day." The intercom buzzed. It was Fernanda, who had become a constant presence since the discovery of the documents, coordinating the legal and business aspects of the recovery of Cavalcanti and Associates. "Grace, I have important news!" Fernanda entered the kitchen with a radiant smile. "We just received confirmation from the court. The company's accounts have been unlocked, and we have already recovered $800,000 from Robert's accounts in Panama." "Is that a lot of money?" Michael asked, putting the potatoes aside. "It is quite a bit, yes. It means that your dad's company can start operating normally again," Fernanda explained. "And what about the employees who haven't received their salaries?" Grace asked, always concerned about the people who depended on the company to support their families. Everyone will be paid by Friday, with adjustments. Edward insisted on prioritizing this when we talked yesterday. Michael thought for a moment. Miss Fernanda, can I ask you something? Of course, Michael. With the company running again, does that mean my dad will go back to working all day and won't have time for me? The question revealed the child's deepest fear, that the return to normalcy would also mean a return to the emotional neglect that had characterized his relationship with his parents before the crisis. Fernanda knelt down to be at eye level with Michael. Your dad specifically asked me to tell you something. When he comes home, the first change will be that he will pick you up from school every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on weekends, you will have special time just for father and son. Michael's green eyes lit up. Really, he promised that? He did. And more, he wants you to help him understand how the company works, because one day you might want to work there too if you want. At that moment, the house phone rang. It was Edward calling from the clinic. Grace, it's Edward. Can I speak with Michael? With slightly trembling hands, Grace passed the phone to the boy. It's your dad, my love. Michael took the phone carefully, as if it was something very precious. Hello, Dad. Hi, my champ. How are you? I'm good, Dad. Miss Grace took care of me when I was sick. She carried me on her back to your office. It was a big adventure. Edward's voice trembled on the other end of the line. Michael, your dad is very proud of you and very grateful. Bye, Miss Grace. You know she is a very special person, right? I know, Dad. I love Miss Grace. She's like a second mom to me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Edward spoke again, his voice was choked with emotion. Michael, Dad is coming home tomorrow, and do you know what the first thing we will do together is? What? We are going to make a special lunch for Miss Grace to thank her for everything she has done for our family. Will you help me? Of course. Miss Grace really likes lasagna and condensed milk pudding. Then it will be lasagna and condensed milk pudding. And Michael? Yes, Dad? I love you very much, my son. Dad has made mistakes, but that will never happen again. When Michael hung up the phone, his eyes were shining with happiness. But it was Miss Grace who surprised everyone by starting to cry. Miss Grace, why are you crying? Michael asked, concerned. These are tears of joy, my love. Your family is coming back together, and that makes me very happy. And you? Will you continue to be part of our family? The question hung in the air like a prayer. Fernanda looked at Miss Grace, waiting for the answer, knowing that this woman had become much more than an employee. She was the emotional heart that kept everything running. Michael, no matter what happens, the love I feel for you and this family will never change. Now how about we finish preparing this lunch? Your dad will be home tomorrow. As they resumed preparing the food, the three of them knew that the next day would mark not only Edward's return, but the beginning of a new phase for everyone. A phase where real values, love, dedication, family, would finally be prioritized over appearances and empty ambitions. The storm had passed. Now it was time to bloom again. The morning of Friday, August 2nd, dawned clear and sunny. A welcome change after weeks of persistent drizzle. Grace woke up earlier than usual, at 4:30 in the morning, with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Today, Edward would come home, and everything would change again. She just didn't know exactly how. As she prepared the special breakfast she had planned, her hands worked automatically, but her mind was filled with uncertainties. Edward had promised changes. Michael was hopeful, but Grace knew well the difficulty of breaking patterns established over the years. Would the crisis really have transformed Edward? Or would he gradually return to his old habits as soon as life normalized? Michael came down to the kitchen at 7 o'clock, already dressed in his favorite Spider-Man t-shirt and clean jeans. His hair was neatly combed. He had asked Miss Grace to teach him how to get ready to look nice when Dad arrived. "Miss Grace, what time is Dad coming?" he asked, sitting at the kitchen table where she had prepared a lovely breakfast. Fresh French bread, fruit cut into fun shapes, scrambled eggs just the way he liked them, and hot chocolate with whipped cream. "Dr. Robert said he would be discharged at 10 o'clock. Your dad should be home around noon." "And then we make the lasagna for him." "Exactly. You will be my special helper in the kitchen." At 9:30, Fernanda arrived accompanied by someone Miss Grace did not expect, Dr. Robert Anderson, the family lawyer. He had a serious but not worried expression. "Grace, I need to talk to you before Edward arrives," Dr. Robert said, sitting in the living room with a folder of documents. "Is something wrong?" Grace felt her heart race. On the contrary, very good things have happened. First, we managed to recover 90% of the money embezzled by Robert. The company is not only solvent, but will be more prosperous than before, because we identified several other administrative issues in the process. Michael, who had been playing on the rug nearby, perked up with interest. "Second," Dr. Robert continued, "Edward has given me specific instructions on how to formally recognize your importance to this family. He wants to offer 3 options, and the decision is entirely yours." Grace leaned forward, curious but apprehensive. "First option, continue as a house employee, but with a salary 3 times higher than your current one. A full health plan for you and your family in Pennsylvania, and 2 weeks of paid vacation per year anywhere you want." Grace's eyes widened. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of earning in her entire life. "Second option, Edward learned that you have a background in accounting and business experience. He would like to offer you a position in the company as a financial consultant with an executive salary, profit sharing, and the flexibility to continue taking care of Michael when necessary." "Me?" Grace couldn't believe it. "Work at the company?" "And the third option?" Michael asked, putting down his toys and approaching the adults. Dr. Robert smiled. "The third option was actually Michael's idea. Edward told me that during a phone call, Michael suggested that you officially become part of the family." "What do you mean?" Grace asked. "Adult adoption. You would legally become Edward's sister, which would make you Michael's official aunt, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails, including participation in the family inheritance and a voice in important decisions about Michael's future." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the clock in the living room. Grace looked at Michael, then at Dr. Robert, trying to process the magnitude of what was being offered. "Michael," she said softly, "did you really suggest that?" "I did. I told Dad that you are already part of our family in our hearts, so why not make it official on paper too?" Tears began to stream down Grace's face. In 42 years of life, she had never imagined that it could be recognized and valued in such a profound way. "You don't need to decide now," Dr. Robert said gently. "Edward wants you to think it over calmly. The important thing is that whatever option you choose, the Cavalcanti family wants you to know that you are irreplaceable." At 11:45, a black BMW stopped in front of the mansion. Michael ran to the living room window. "It's him! It's Dad!" he shouted, running toward the door. Edward got out of the car looking visibly different. He had lost about 5 pounds, his hair was greyer, but there was something in his posture that conveyed serenity instead of the constant tension from before. When Michael threw himself into his arms, he lifted him up and hugged him for long minutes, as if he were recovering all the lost time. "My champion! How I've missed you!" Edward said, his voice choked with emotion. "Dad, you look different. You seem happier." "I really do, Michael. And do you know why? Because I learned what the most important thing in life is." "What?" "You, our family, the people we truly love." When they entered the house, Edward immediately looked for Grace, who was standing discreetly at the end of the hallway. He walked up to her and, to his total surprise, hugged her. "Grace, there are not enough words to thank you for everything you have done for us, for Michael, for me, for our family." "Mr. Edward, please, just call me Edward. Mr. is in the past, along with many other things. I want to forget." That afternoon, the kitchen of the Cavalcanti mansion was the scene of something that had never happened before. Edward, Michael, and Grace cooked together. The businessman, who probably had never even made a fried egg in his life, was religiously following Grace's instructions to prepare lasagna. "Dad, you're going backward." Michael laughed as he watched Edward trying to handle the lasagna dough. "It's harder than running a business." Edward laughed too, something he hadn't done in months. During the meal preparation, he talked about his treatment, about how he had understood that his obsession with work, and later with games, were ways to escape deep fears of inadequacy and failure. "You know, Grace, for years, I thought being a good father meant providing everything material for Michael. A big house, an expensive school, brand-name clothes. But I never thought that what he really wanted was my presence, my time, my attention." "Children are simpler than adults think," Grace replied, watching Michael decorate the pudding with cherries. "They just want to feel loved and important." "And you always knew that. That's why he loves you so much." When they sat down to dinner on the lasagna they had prepared together, Edward made a toast with grape juice. "I want to toast to the two most important people in my life, Michael, my son, who taught me that courage comes in small packages, and Grace, who showed that true love has no price or social position." That night, after Michael went to bed, Edward and Grace talked on the porch of the house, watching the garden illuminated by streetlights. "Grace, about the options Dr. Robert presented." "Edward, can I speak first?" "Of course." "I thought a lot today, and my answer is yes to all three options." Edward looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" "I want to continue taking care of this house because it is my home too. I want to work at the company because I have knowledge to contribute. And I want to be officially part of the family because I have felt that way for years." Edward smiled, a genuine and free smile. "Then welcome officially to the Cavalcanti family, sister." For the first time in a long time, the future seemed not only possible but bright. 6 months later, on a sunny morning in February 2025, the mansion in the gardens breathed a completely different energy. The same marble walls and the same mahogany furniture remained, but the house had transformed into a true home, where laughter echoed through the halls and genuine love replaced the empty formalities of the past. Grace woke up at 6 in the morning, as she always did, but now her room was on the second floor of the house, next to Michael's room, a change that Edward had insisted on after the formalization of the adult adoption in September. Her new room was spacious and comfortable, decorated with some photographs of her family in Three Rivers and plants that she cultivated on her private balcony. More important than the material comfort was the feeling of belonging. She finally had a place she could truly call her own. When she went down to the kitchen, she found Edward already awake, preparing breakfast coffee, a skill he had developed with surprising dedication in recent months. Wearing a simple robe and slippers, he was far from the image of the impeccably dressed businessman he used to be. "Good morning, sister." Edward smiled, using the term that had become natural between them. "I managed to make the pancakes the way Michael likes. Can you take a look to see if they're right?" Grace tasted a small portion and nodded approvingly. "Perfect. You're becoming a real chef." The family's morning routine had completely transformed. Edward now worked only 4 days a week, dedicating Fridays entirely to Michael and weekends to the family. The company, under the new management shared between Edward and Fernanda, who had become a partner after recovering the misappropriated funds, was more prosperous than ever, operating with total transparency and social responsibility. Michael ran down the stairs, already dressed for school, but now with a completely different energy from the lonely and needy child of months past. At 8 years old, he had grown not only physically but emotionally, radiating the confidence of a child who knows he is deeply loved. "Good morning, Dad. Good morning, Aunt Grace," he greeted, hugging both before sitting at the table. "Today is a special day, right, champ?" Edward: "Yes, Mum is coming home today." Michael smiled brightly. Isabella had completed her rehabilitation treatment the week before and had spent the last few days in a gradual readjustment period, progressively visiting family. Today marked her definitive return home, finally completing the family reunion everyone had been waiting for. "Are you excited?" Grace asked, although the answer was obvious from the sparkle in the boy's green eyes. "Very. And you know what? Yesterday, when Mum came for dinner, she said she loves me very much and that she will never be absent like before. She promised that now she will be a present mom." The changes in Isabella had been as dramatic as those of Edward. The treatment not only cured her chemical dependency, but also helped her rediscover her identity beyond the societal expectations that had trapped her for years. The woman who emerged from rehabilitation was more genuine, more connected to her own feelings and values. At 9 in the morning, after taking Michael to school together, another family ritual that Edward had adopted, they returned home for the final preparations for Isabella's return. The house had been discreetly decorated with fresh flowers, and Grace had prepared her favorite lunch, grilled salmon with vegetables and a berry dessert. "Grace," Edward said while helping to tidy up the living room, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Edward. Now we are family, right? You can ask anything." "Are you happy? I mean, with all these changes, with your new life? Do you feel fulfilled?" Grace stopped arranging the sofa cushions and looked out the window at the garden, where flowers of various colors bloomed under the February sun. It was a question she had asked herself many times in recent months. "Edward, do you know what the greatest discovery of my life has been?" "What?" "I discovered that happiness is not a destination we arrive at. It's a choice we make every day. When I chose to carry Michael on my back that July day, I wasn't thinking about rewards or recognition. I was choosing love over convenience. And now I wake up every day choosing to be grateful. Grateful for having a family that loves me, for having a job that fulfills me, for being able to see Michael growing up happy and healthy. Grateful for helping you all find each other again." Edward approached and hugged her. "We are the ones who are grateful, Grace. You saved our family." "No, Edward, we saved our family. Together." At 2 in the afternoon, Isabella arrived accompanied by Dr. Mark, who would oversee her outpatient follow-up for family reintegration. She looked visibly different, thinner, with shorter natural hair, wearing simple yet elegant clothing. More importantly, her blue eyes sparkled with a clarity they hadn't had in years. "Grace," Isabella warmly hugged her, "how can I thank you for everything you've done for us? For me, for Edward, especially for Michael?" "Isabella, you don't need to thank me for anything. Family takes care of family." "That's exactly it. Family." Isabella smiled, and for the first time in years her smile was genuine. "Grace, I want to ask you for forgiveness for all the years I treated you like a maid when you've always been so much more than that. You've always been the heart of this home." When Michael came home from school at 5 in the afternoon and found his mother in the kitchen helping Grace prepare cookies, his joy was explosive. He ran into her arms, and they hugged for long minutes. "Mom, you're different, more present," Michael said, with the simple honesty of children. "I am, my love. Mom learned very important things while she was away. I learned that you are the most important thing in my life, and that I want to be here for every special moment of yours." That night, the family had dinner together for the first time in over a year. The kitchen table, instead of the formal dining room, hosted a simple yet meaningful meal. Edward talked about the new projects at the company, including a scholarship program for employees' children. Isabella shared her plans to resume her psychology degree that she had abandoned years ago. Michael shared his adventures at school and his plans for the science project. And Grace just watched, her heart overflowing with gratitude for that family she had helped rebuild and that now completely included her. "You know what?" Michael said, finishing his condensed milk pudding. "I think our family got much better after almost losing it. It's like we learned to truly love." The simple words of an 8-year-old resonated at the table like a profound truth. Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to discover what truly matters. Later, when Michael was asleep and Edward and Isabella were talking in the living room about plans for the future, Grace stepped out onto the balcony and looked at the stars in the clear New York City sky. Her mind traveled back to that cold July day when she carried a sick child on her back for over 10 kilometers. At the time, it seemed just an act of desperation and maternal love. Now she understood that it had been the first step of a journey that would transform not only Michael's life, but an entire family, including her own. Genuine love, she discovered, has the power to move mountains, or, in her case, to carry children across entire cities and, in the process, carry a whole family back home, to the place where they truly belonged. Together, united by what is most powerful in the universe, the unconditional love of people who choose every day to care for one another. As a gentle breeze swayed the leaves in the garden, Grace smiled at the stars and whispered a prayer of gratitude. The storm had definitely passed. Now, finally, it was spring for all of them. Please like, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and if you watched until now, comment, "I watched until now," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very exciting.